Usually, when we talk about human psychology and trauma, there's this expectation of precision.
Right, like it's a hard science.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like engineering or something. You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line on the dark film, and the doctor just points at it and says, well, there it is.
It's very binary, very visible. You cast it, it heals, and you just move on.
Broken or not broken, it's clean.
And, I mean, it's comforting, right? We really like things to be visible. We want them to be categorized.
Oh, totally.
We want to see the emotional fracture just as clearly as a physical one because, well, if we can see it, we can treat it.
But then you step into the world of internet fiction, neurodevelopment, and these really hidden emotional scars, and suddenly that X-ray machine is it's completely useless.
Yeah, it doesn't work at all.
The fractures aren't bone. They are these intricate, invisible ways that we construct defenses around ourselves. So we're looking at a narrative landscape today that is super murky, heavily disguised, and, frankly, fiercely protected.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean, the masks we wear to hide our pain, the defense mechanisms we build up over a lifetime, they are designed specifically to defeat that metaphorical X-ray. They are literally built to keep people out.
Which brings us to the massive, towering stack of sources sitting in front of us today for this deep dive.
It is quite the stack.
It really is. We are looking at a sprawling collection of excerpts from a DeviantArt creator who goes by the name Casper Frisk.
And we should note he's incredibly prolific.
Oh, insanely prolific. He has published over 250 distinct stories since roughly 2020, I think, though his roots in writing fan fiction go way back to 2013.
Right, he's been at this a while.
Yeah. And he has built this fiercely loyal community of around 1,300 followers who just dissect and analyze his every single word.
Which is fascinating for such a specific niche.
It really is. And our mission today, tailored directly for you, the listener, is to untangle this niche fantasy universe. We're going to explain the most important themes and characters in this fantasy world in a simple way so we can make the invisible visible.
Which is, honestly, a formidable challenge, because if you just glance at the surface of these sources, you might think you've stumbled into something entirely disconnected from reality.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, at first glance, looking through these pages, they read like highly specific, surreal fantasy tropes.
Very heavily focused on physical extremes.
Exactly. Like people shrinking down to the size of a coin or growing larger than mountain ranges. In the online fiction world, these are known as the shrink and giantess genres.
And for someone uninitiated or just, casually browsing the internet, those genres might seem purely fantastical.
Right, just weird internet stuff.
Yeah, they might look like an exercise in bizarre world building or just extreme thought experiments involving physics and perspective.
But underneath the magic, underneath the shifting sizes, the giant mushrooms, the tiny adventurers navigating suburban bedrooms, underneath all of that lies a profoundly deep exploration of human trauma.
Trauma, bullying, isolation.
Yeah, and the painful, heavy masks that we all wear every single day. So, okay, let's unpack this. How exactly is a 34-year-old Danish storyteller using highly specific internet fiction to heal real-world psychological wounds?
That is the essential question we have to answer. And the goal here isn't just to summarize his plots. I mean, listing what happens is easy.
Anyone can read a plot summary.
Right. We need to answer the why. Why do these specific characters, with their extreme size-shifting adventures, resonate so deeply with his readers?
Yeah, like what's the actual psychological utility of making a character the size of a mouse or the size of a skyscraper?
Exactly. And to understand the architecture of this universe, we really have to start with the architect himself.
Casper Frisk.
Yes. Before we meet the giant princesses or the tiny swordsman, we need to talk about him.
Yeah.
Because his real-world creative process is completely intertwined with the themes of his stories.
Right, he isn't just writing about barriers. He is actively fighting through one to even create the work in the first place.
Yes, his background is crucial context here. Casper is a creator who struggles with severe dyslexia.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. For a long time, the sheer mechanics of spelling, syntax, grammar, it was all a massive, impenetrable wall between the vivid worlds in his head and the blank page in front of him.
Which is it's such a frustrating paradox if you think about it.
It really is.
I mean, imagine having an entire high fantasy epic playing out in your mind in like stunning 4K resolution. You know exactly what the forest smells like.
Yeah.
You know the exact heartbreak a character feels when they're betrayed.
You hear the dialogue perfectly.
Yes. You hear it all. But every time you try to translate that mental movie into physical text, the letters just refuse to cooperate. The alphabet itself becomes this hostile environment. It must be incredibly isolating.
It is deeply isolating. It's a literal form of voicelessness. But he developed a really unique philosophy to overcome this, which he calls the 70-30 rule.
The 70-30 rule, how does that work?
Well, he spends a massive amount of time purely visualizing the story. He builds the emotional core, the character arcs, the plot points, the underlying psychology towns. All of this is constructed intricately in his mind before a single word is typed.
So he's doing all the heavy lifting mentally.
Exactly. He writes the core 70% of the story himself.
Right, the soul of the story, the empathy, the pacing, the thematic weight, that is all 100% human. That is all Casper.
And then he brings in his co-author, which in his case is AI, specifically ChatGPT.
Okay, so that's the 30%.
Yes, he uses the AI for the remaining 30%. The AI polishes the text, fixes the dyslexic spelling errors, and helps improve the linguistic flow.
So it's a tool.
Entirely. It's used strictly to translate his mental visualization into readable text without losing that emotional resonance.
Well, I want to push back on this a little bit because this is obviously a massive point of contention in the creative world right now.
Oh, absolutely. The AI debate is everywhere.
Yeah. There is a huge vocal backlash against AI in literature and art. A lot of people argue that art is fundamentally the expression of the human soul.
Right.
So if he is using ChatGPT to write or polish 30% of the text, aren't we losing 30% of the humanity? Isn't that just outsourcing the empathy to a server farm? Like, does the story still have its original soul if a machine is picking the adjectives?
It's a completely valid skepticism, and it's one Casper addresses directly in his notes. He defends his use of AI quite passionately, actually, but very pragmatically.
Pragmatically how?
Well, he doesn't view the AI as a replacement for his soul. He views it as a prosthetic for his dyslexia.
A prosthetic. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, and he uses a striking historical analogy to explain his stance. He compares the modern backlash against AI to the historical transition from horses to cars.
The horse and the car. Wait, how does he frame that?
So when cars first appeared on dirt roads, people who relied entirely on horses like blacksmiths, carriage drivers, stable hands, they were angry.
Naturally. Their livelihoods were threatened.
Right. They were confused and resistant to the change. They argued that cars lacked the spirit of a living animal, that they were dangerous, that they ruined the tradition of travel.
Okay, I see where he's going with this.
But eventually, the car just became the standard tool for transportation. It democratized travel. Casper views AI the exact same way. It's a necessary vehicle to transport his ideas out of his isolated mind and into the real world.
He also makes a really stark economic point in the sources about accessibility, which I thought was super interesting.
Oh, about the illustration costs.
Yeah. He's an independent creator. He states that a single professional illustration can cost up to 1,000 Danish kroner.
Which is a lot for an indie writer.
It's a ton.
Yeah.
If he wanted to hire a team of professional artists and human editors for 250 distinct stories, it would require a massive budget. He simply doesn't have it.
The gatekeeping of the publishing industry is largely financial.
Exactly. It's a paywall.
Right.
Without AI, these stories and the very real healing messages inside them might have remained locked inside his head forever.
And that would be a real loss for his readers.
So, taking your explanation, it makes me think of how we process blockbuster cinema. Is his process essentially like a film director using heavy CGI?
Oh, that's a cool comparison.
Yeah.
Walk me through how you see the parallel.
Well, think about a massive sci-fi movie. The CGI rendering engine is what makes the dragon look hyper-realistic, or the alien landscape looked breathtaking.
Right, it's the technical execution.
Exactly. It's the execution that gets you to suspend your disbelief. But if the movie makes you cry when a character dies, it's not because the pixels were rendered well.
No, the pixels don't feel grief.
Exactly. The emotional core of the script, the pacing of the tragedy, the human relationships that still belongs entirely to the human director who conceived the scene.
I see what you mean.
The AI, in Casper's case, is just the CGI team rendering his emotional script so the audience can actually see it.
That is an excellent way to frame it. The rendering engine doesn't invent the empathy. It just makes the empathy visible to the audience.
Right.
And Casper is rendering his own highly personal human experience through these fantastical size shifts. Which actually brings us to the fundamental strategy he uses to deliver that empathy. He calls it the good cheat, or his Trojan horse.
The good cheat. I was fascinated by this when reading through the notes. He states explicitly that only 20% of his work is just for fun.
Yeah, just sheer entertainment.
Right. The other 80% carries deep, heavy psychological meaning.
Yes. But he understands a harsh truth about human attention spans.
I don't have one.
Basically, if he just wrote a dry, literal autobiography about the pain of being bullied or a clinical self-help essay about the mechanics of social isolation, very few people would click on it.
It's too heavy. It feels like homework.
Exactly. People want to be entertained. They want to escape. They don't log on to DeviantArt to be lectured about their childhood trauma.
No, you go there to look at cool art and read fun stories.
Precisely. So he uses the extreme visual hook of the Giantess and Shrink genres as his Trojan horse. He lures the reader in with the spectacle.
Like a massive girl stepping over a castle.
Or a tiny man hiding in a teenager's jacket pocket. These are visually arresting, fantastical concepts. And once the reader is captivated by the sheer spectacle of the fantasy, he opens the trapdoor.
And drops them into the therapy session.
Exactly. Suddenly, without realizing how they got there, the reader is engaging with profound themes of emotional scarring, feeling invisible, or the sheer terror of taking up too much space in society.
It is a brilliant psychological trick. You come for the magic trick, and you leave with a therapy session.
It really is.
So we know how this world is built, right? The mechanics of his 70-30 rule and the Trojan horse strategy behind it, but theory only goes so far. We really need to step into the stories themselves to see how this actually operates.
We do.
If the shifting sizes are just a mechanism to explore psychology, what psychological reality are we exploring when a character suddenly grows to the size of a mountain?
We explore the terror of consequence. And we see this perfectly illustrated in the story of Princess Gwendolyn.
Ah, Gwendolyn. She is a fascinating starting point because her initial motivation is so incredibly grounded, despite the high fantasy setting.
Very relatable.
Right. She's a young royal living in a beautiful, safe castle, but she is utterly desperate for adventure. And her frustration is rooted in a dynamic that almost every single person listening to this can relate to.
Her mother.
Yes. Her mother, the queen, constantly tells her that she is not big enough yet. You're not big enough to go into the forest. You're not big enough to see the world. You're not big enough to make your own choices.
It is the classic, universal feeling of childhood powerlessness. And notice the specific language used there. Not big enough.
Yeah, physical size.
Physical size is being used as a literal justification to restrict her autonomy. The phrase becomes a psychological cage. She associates physical growth directly with freedom and respect.
So, feeling trapped by this metric of size, Gwendolyn rebels. She sneaks out of the castle at night, venturing deep into the forbidden forest, and she finds a magical plant called the giant blossom.
And the sources describe it so vividly.
They really do. It's a silver and green flower with this glowing, pulsing golden core. She touches it, hoping the magic will just bump her up a few years. She just wants to be a little bit older, a little bit taller, so her mother will finally take her seriously.
Just a small boost.
Exactly. But the magic is wildly unstable. She touches the core, passes out, and when she wakes up, the perspective has violently shifted.
Drastically shifted.
The massive ancient oaks around her now look like little matchsticks. She has grown to the size of a literal mountain.
And this is where Casper's thematic engine just kicks into high gear. On the surface, the Trojan horse is working. It's a visually stunning magic trick.
Giant princess in a tiny forest.
Right. But psychologically, Gwendolyn's sudden, uncontrollable physical growth is a metaphor for the terrifying, chaotic transition of growing up.
Oh, like puberty and adulthood.
Exactly. It represents that awkward, terrifying phase in late adolescence or early adulthood where you suddenly do have power, you do have autonomy, but you have absolutely no idea how to wield it safely.
It's the whiplash of consequence. She goes from being told she's too small and fragile to suddenly being a walking natural disaster. Every time she shifts her weight, she creates an earthquake.
And she isn't empowered by this at all.
No, she is terrified. The story details these horrific nightmares she starts having. She dreams of walking back to her beautiful castle, tripping, and accidentally crushing her mother.
Which is so symbolic.
Right. Her mother, who was previously this towering, unshakable figure of authority, is now just a tiny, fragile speck that Gwendolyn could destroy by accident. The guilt and the terror of her own newfound power is completely overwhelming.
It perfectly encapsulates the fear of being seen as a monster when you make mistakes in life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, when you're a child, your mistakes are small. You break a vase, you scrape your knee. But when you are an adult or when you gain real power in society, your missteps have severe collateral damage.
You can ruin lives, destroy careers, break hearts.
Yes. Gwendolyn isn't evil, she doesn't want to hurt anyone, but her mere existence is now a literal threat to the people she loves. She's paralyzed by the fear of her own footprint.
But the brilliance of the story is that she doesn't have to navigate this paralysis alone. Casper introduces a cast of characters that act as different societal reactions to her size.
Yes, the supporting cast is great here.
The first person she meets is Bob. And I have to say, the introduction of Bob is fantastic.
Bob is the anchor of the story. Describe the encounter for us.
Okay, so Gwendolyn wakes up as a mountain. She's having an existential meltdown, and she sees this tiny speck of a man in the forest. For her, he's the size of a toy figurine.
Barely visible.
Barely. But this speck just calmly walks up to her massive face, points his little walking stick at her nose, and casually goes, "I'm Bob."
I love that.
And Gwendolyn, who's currently taller than the clouds, just stares down at him in disbelief and says, "Bob." That's it.
Bob possesses this incredible, unflappable calm, and his role is vital. He represents the voice of lived experience and grounded reason.
He's seen some stuff.
He really has. He's an elderly adventurer who has seen it all. He tells her stories of his youth fighting trolls and swamp spirits that steal people's left shoes. He completely demystifies the fantasy of the situation for her.
He absolutely refuses to be intimidated by her size.
Exactly. When the rest of the world will inevitably look at her and see a monster, Bob looks at her and just sees a scared teenager who made a mistake with a magical flower. He strips away the spectacle.
He becomes her guide, sitting up on her massive shoulder as she carefully navigates the forest. And shortly after, they encounter Simon.
Ah, Simon.
Simon is a knight of the realm, and his introduction is pure, brilliant comedic relief. Gwendolyn hears someone yelling for help, and she peers down to find this fully armored knight stuck headfirst inside a hollow log.
Just his legs kicking.
Yes. His metal-clad legs kicking in the air.
Simon is the perfect foil to Bob. If Bob represents grounded wisdom, Simon represents rigid societal duty. He also highlights the sheer comedic absurdity of normal, rigid life confronting something impossibly huge.
Totally. Gwendolyn, trying to be helpful, gently pinches him by the armored ankles and plucks him out of the log like a carrot.
Like a carrot. And Simon's reaction is priceless. He just freezes.
Right, he's this proud, stoic knight of the realm, and he's suddenly dangling face to face with a princess whose eyeball is larger than his horse.
Which has to be terrifying.
Oh, beyond terrifying. His immediate trained instinct is to draw his sword and declare dark magic. But he is fundamentally driven by knightly duty. He recognizes her as the princess.
So what does he do?
So hilariously, he sheathes his sword and pledges to protect her. He puffs out his chest and says, "I will follow you and protect you."
Protect the mountain.
Yeah. And Gwendolyn, who could literally squash a bear with her pinky toe at this point, just finds it so incredibly sweet and absurd. She gently places him on her other shoulder, opposite Bob.
It creates this beautiful, surreal dynamic. A mountain-sized girl carrying a cynical old adventurer and an overly serious knight on her shoulders, tiptoeing through the world so she doesn't crush it.
It's a great visual.
It is, but the reality of her terrifying size hits incredibly hard when they finally reach civilization, when they approach the town of Eldermere.
Yes, this is the pivot point of her arc. She approaches Eldermere, trying to be as gentle and slow as possible, but the sheer sight of her causes absolute panic.
The Trojan horse drops its disguise right here.
Farmers drop their tools and run screaming into the woods. A man literally faints backward into a cornfield. People are pointing and shouting monster. It is the exact realization of her worst nightmare. Society sees her power as a threat.
But the panic is interrupted by the arrival of Lady Sophie, the leader of Eldermere. And Sophie is a brilliant piece of character design by Casper.
He really is.
The sources note she has a blind eye and a jagged scar running down her face. She has clearly seen battle. She has faced real, tangible horrors.
So she's not easily spooked.
Exactly. So when she rides out to meet this giant, she doesn't run. She calmly rides her horse right up to Gwendolyn's massive house-sized toes, looks straight up into the sky, and simply demands an explanation.
Sophie's presence entirely grounds the Count's panic. She listens to Bob explain the situation with a giant blossom, and rather than mobilizing an army, she points them toward a witch in the swamp who might be able to brew a shrinking potion.
It's very pragmatic.
Very.
Right.
But the underlying lesson here is how Sophie interacts with the giant.
Yeah.
She treats Gwendolyn not as a beast to be slain, but as a person with a severe logistical problem.
Which sets the stage for how Gwendolyn herself decides to act. If studying physical growth exposes a character to society's judgment, the ultimate test is how the character responds to that judgment. When given ultimate terrifying power, the instinct for many would be to conquer, to demand respect, or conversely, to hide in shame. But what's fascinating here is how Gwendolyn uses her terrifying new size.
She uses it to listen, which is so counterintuitive to how giants are usually portrayed in media.
Usually they just smash things.
Exactly. And we see her empathy perfectly mapped out in her interaction with the next character they meet, Bellis. They are walking through a dark, swampy, isolated part of the forest, and they hear this booming, heavy crying. It sounds like thunder.
And what do they find?
They push aside some massive trees and find a troll. A massive, ugly, gray-green troll. But he's not eating anyone. He's sitting against a rock, sobbing into his giant warty hands.
Bellis is the ultimate misjudged outcast in this universe. Trolls in typical fantasy settings, and even in this one, are assumed to be violent, crude, and dangerous.
The bad guys.
Right. But Bellis just sits in the forest crying because he loves delicate things. He loves flowers. He loves the sound of songbirds. He loves the quiet beauty of the forest.
Oh, that's so sad.
It is. But because of his physical size and his species, humans throw stones at him if he gets near a town, and other trolls reject and beat him for not being troll enough. He is entirely isolated by the physical form he was born into.
And this is where Gwendolyn's empathy really shines. She looks down at this sobbing monster, and she doesn't see a threat. She sees a mirror. She sees exactly how the farmers in Eldermere looked at her just a few hours ago. So instead of attacking him or ignoring him, she sits down. The earth literally shakes as she sits, but she lowers herself to his level and talks to him. She promises to find him a home where he can look at flowers in peace without people throwing rocks at him.
By validating his gentleness, Bellis becomes her fiercely loyal friend, and he leads them safely to the one person in the swamp who can actually brew the shrinking potion, Tilda the Witch.
Tilda. I want to spend some time on Tilda because her character is an absolute masterclass in turning internal psychological struggles into external fantasy elements.
Oh, definitely.
She lives under a giant hollowed-out mushroom deep in the swamp, and she is plagued by 3 distinct, literal voices in her head.
Let's break those voices down, because they are a perfect map of cognitive distortions. You have one voice that is dark, cynical, and constantly assuming the worst.
The classic inner critic.
Yes. You have a second voice that is perpetually sleepy, bored, and apathetic, draining all her energy. And then you have Tilda's own real voice, constantly trying to argue with the other two.
It's exhausting just reading about it. Tilda's story is a profound, literal look at severe anxiety and self-isolation. She tells Gwendolyn that she used to live in the town of Eldermere. She was part of society.
But she left.
She packed up and moved into this dangerous, lonely swamp because she was utterly convinced that everyone in town hated her. She assumed every whisper in the town square was an insult directed at her. Every burst of laughter was someone mocking her behind her back.
It is a striking metaphor for how mental health struggles distort our perception of reality. The sleepy voice represents depression, sapping her will to engage. The cynical voice represents the internal critic telling her she is worthless.
And she just believed them.
She projected those internal critics entirely onto the external world. She made the swamp her reality because her mind told her she didn't belong anywhere else.
But here's the turning point. Because Gwendolyn just spoke directly to Lady Sophie, the leader of the town, Gwendolyn knows the actual truth.
Right.
She looks at Tilda and says, "Actually, the town misses you," Sophie told me. "They liked your potions. They liked your baked goods. They wonder where you went."
And that revelation shatters Tilda's worldview. She has this massive paradigm-shifting realization. She didn't leave because the town hated her. She left because the voices in her own head convinced her the town hated her.
It was all internal.
Her isolation was a complete lie, fueled by her own unchecked internal anxiety. It takes this giant, clumsy princess stumbling into your swamp to gently point out the objective truth that Tilda couldn't see through her panic.
And right at this moment, amidst all this incredibly heavy psychological realization about anxiety and isolation, Caspar Frisk throws in one of the most brilliant, highly comedic scenes in the entire source material.
Oh, the heist.
Yes. He completely breaks the tension with what the community calls the troll shoe heist.
It is absolute Shakespearean slapstick perfection and functionally necessary, honestly. If a story is too heavy for too long, the reader just goes numb. The humor resets the emotional palate.
Exactly. So Gwendolyn finally gets to sleep while Tilda brews the potion inside the mushroom. And while the giant girl is sleeping in the swamp, a group of dim-witted, average-sized trolls sneak out of the woods.
Now, we have to remember the scale here.
Oh, right. Gwendolyn is the size of a mountain. Her shoes are the size of Spanish galleons. Her socks are the size of circus tents.
And these trolls stumble upon her sleeping form in the dark, and they don't even realize she's a biological person at first. They find her leather shoe, and they treat it like an ancient, mythical, architectural treasure.
The dialogue in this scene is so good. You have one troll wearing a rusty cooking pot as a helmet, who touches the thick leather of her shoe and whispers in awe, "My throne."
The throne!
Yeah. Another troll shoves him and argues, "No, it's a boat."
Yeah.
A third one pats the toe and says, "It's a house."
It's just so funny.
And then one of them spots the edge of her massive woolen sock draped over her ankle and gasps, because a piece of fabric that big could be a winter tent for the whole tribe, or a sail for their new shoe boat.
The complete deadpan absurdity of treating a teenager's footwear like prime real estate.
They decide they absolutely must steal the shoes, but there's a fatal flaw in their heist plan.
The giant girl is currently wearing them.
Exactly. So they spend an entire hour trying to untie her shoelaces. And to them, the shoelaces are like thick ship mooring ropes. They are throwing their own ropes around the laces, having massive tug-of-war matches, tripping over each other in the mud.
A literal struggle.
They finally decide the shoe is just being stubborn, so the leader with the pot helmet takes his club and just whacks the side of the shoe as hard as he can.
Which naturally wakes the mountain.
Gwendolyn opens her eyes, sits up, and the earth literally groans. The trolls absolutely panic. They scatter, falling into bushes. One runs face first into the shoe he was just trying to steal.
Oh, man.
And Simon the Knight, ever dutiful, draws his sword and yells attack, before suddenly realizing he's threatening creatures that are the size of bugs compared to Gwendolyn.
And this is the payoff of the scene. How does Gwendolyn react to being attacked by trolls in the dark? Not with the fury of a giant, but with the bewildered amusement of a child.
Right. She just looks down at these terrified trolls holding tiny ropes and asks, "You're trying to steal my shoes?"
Of the...
And they confess their grand architectural plans for the shoe boats and sock tents. And she laughs. She actually reaches down, takes off her giant shoes and socks, and just gives them to the trolls.
It just gives them away.
But on one condition. They have to stop stealing from travelers in the swamp, and they have to promise to be nice to bellies.
It's a wonderful resolution. Immediately after this, Tilda finishes the potion. Gwendolyn drinks it, shrinks back down to her normal teenage size, and finally returns to her castle.
But she doesn't return the same. She brings Bellis with her.
Yes, and Lady Sophie, true to her word, actually offers the gentle troll a job in the town, proving that empathy and exposure can actually overcome entrenched societal prejudice.
So Gwendolyn's story thoroughly explores the chaotic burden of being impossibly large, the fear of crushing the world, the isolation of power. But if sudden, uncontrollable growth is a metaphor for the collateral damage of adulthood, what psychological mechanism are we exploring when the magic goes in reverse?
When they shrink.
Yeah. What happens when the perspective completely flips and the heroes are the ones who are impossibly small and impossibly vulnerable?
That transition takes us into a much darker, much more visceral corner of Caspar Frisk's fantasy universe. We move from the comedic relief of shoe-stealing trolls to the story of Timmy.
Yeah, the tone shift here is jarring in the best, most effective way possible. Timmy is a human hero, a skilled swordsman navigating a grim, brutal reality. He is tracking down a vicious gang of bandits in the deep forest.
But these bandits aren't stealing gold from merchants or wrestling horses.
Yeah.
They are hunting magical creatures. Specifically, they are hunting fairies.
And the cruelty detailed in these specific sources is not glossed over. It is visceral. The bandits no longer just kidnap the fairies to sell them whole as exotic pets.
Right. It's much worse.
Because of high black market demands for magical potions in the cities, the bandits have realized the parts are worth more than the whole. They are violently ripping the wings off the living fairies to sell them, leaving the victims traumatized, mutilated, and broken in dirty iron cages.
The imagery is incredibly heavy. The story describes Timmy finding a raided camp, discovering a cage full of fairies huddled together in the dark, shivering, with fresh bloody scars where their iridescent wings used to be.
It's awful.
Timmy systematically dismantles these bandit camps, but he doesn't do it with a heroic battle cry. He beats them down silently, with cold, controlled fury.
Interestingly, he doesn't even kill them.
No, he shatters their weapons and leaves them tied up for the authorities. His entire focus, his entire emotional energy is directed at the victims.
This story is Casper's direct, unflinching allegory for the devastating, permanent effects of severe trauma. Specifically, severe bullying and abuse. The wingless fairies represent victims who have had their innocence, their freedom, and a core part of their identity violently stolen from them.
They are just injured, they are fundamentally altered by the violence.
Timmy brings the rescued, mutilated fairies to a hidden sanctuary in the city. And here we meet two vital characters, Tom and Gwen.
Let's talk about Tom first.
Okay.
Tom is an old, deeply gentle man who runs this sanctuary for mutilated magical creatures. And it's not just fairies. The story notes that Timmy walks past a pen and sees a unicorn standing there, its head hanging low, with a jagged, scarred surface where its magical horn used to be.
It's a stark visual representation of permanent, irreversible loss.
Yes. And working alongside Tom is Gwen, a healer. But she isn't just bandaging wounds. She's doing something desperately experimental.
Right. She's trying to graft wings.
Exactly. She is trying to find a way to surgically and magically graft wings back onto the fairies who have lost the will to live. Because as she explains to Timmy in a really heartbreaking scene, when a fairy loses its wings, it doesn't just lose the aerodynamic ability to fly.
It's deeper than that.
It loses its connection to magic. It loses a literal piece of its soul. They fall into a deep, terminal depression.
And the sources detail a truly gut-wrenching moment in the sanctuary to hammer this reality home. While Tom is carefully unloading the cages Timmy just brought in, he reaches in to pull out a fairy, and the fairy is dead.
Not from blood loss.
No, not from blood loss, but because the psychological trauma was simply too much to bear. The spirit broke, and the fairy's partner, who survived, flies down to Tom's hand, screaming, grabbing the lifeless body, utterly unable to comprehend the loss.
Timmy just stands there in the background, watching this horrific grief unfold, utterly powerless.
He has a sword on his hip, he's a master combatant, but his sword couldn't save that life. The narrative makes it clear that his mission isn't just about swinging a weapon and punishing the bad guys.
It's about holding space for those who have been irreparably damaged, recognizing that some wounds cannot be fixed by a hero.
Which leads directly into the defining psychological twist of Timmy's entire arc. Tom hears a rumor about a fresh, undiscovered colony of fairies deep in the untamed woods. He fears the bandits will find them next.
So he sends Timmy.
Right. He asks Timmy to ride out and investigate, to warn them. Timmy finds the area, but before he can even open his mouth to announce his friendly intentions, he is ambushed.
But not by the bandits.
No. He is ambushed by three fairies, Sophie, Anna, and Mia. They are already deeply traumatized by the recent rumors of attacks on their kind. They see a human man, a tall, armed human man walking into their sacred territory, and their collective trauma and fear instantly take over.
They don't know he's there to help.
Mia, using powerful defensive fairy magic, casts a spell directly at Timmy. The world warps. Suddenly, the trees shoot up into the sky like rockets. The blades of grass become towering green pillars. Timmy shrinks down until he is barely the size of a field mouse.
He drops to his knees in the dirt, completely disoriented, as these three fairies who were tiny to him moments ago, but are now enormous giants compared to him, descend from the sky.
They mock him, assuming he's an advanced scout for the bandits. They pick him up, holding his tiny, struggling body tightly between their fingers.
It's a total reversal of power.
Okay, I have to stop here and challenge this narrative choice. As a reader, I felt real friction here. Does this not completely ruin Timmy's ability to be a hero?
How do you mean?
The entire setup is that he is a swordsman. He relies on his physical strength and martial skill to save people from monsters. Now, he is suddenly completely powerless, disarmed, and held captive by the very fairies he's trying to protect. He can't fight the bandits anymore if he's the size of a mouse. If the goal is to stop the abuse, does the shrinking trope not completely defeat the functional purpose of his character?
It's a very common reaction, but if you look at the underlying psychology, it does the exact opposite. It elevates his character.
Really?
This is the absolute genius of the shrink trope when used in psychological storytelling. By physically shrinking the human hero, the creator forces something far more important than martial prowess. He forces absolute, undeniable, lived empathy.
Break that down for me. How is losing his power a victory for empathy?
Think about Timmy's status before he was shrunk. When he was a normal-sized human, he pitied the fairies, he was angry on their behalf, he fought for them, he had deep sympathy.
Right, he was the good guy.
But he was still operating from a position of immense privilege and physical power. He was the classic savior looking down literally and figuratively at the victims. He could walk away at any time. He didn't share their existential dread.
Ah, I see. The privilege of the savior.
Precisely. By shrinking him, the magic violently strips away his privilege. Timmy literally has to experience the terrifying, paralyzing vulnerability of the fairies to truly understand their daily plight.
Wow, that's heavy.
When he is held in Sophie's hand, suspended high in the air, his feet dangling, knowing that a single slight squeeze of her fingers could crush his ribs and end his life, he is feeling the exact, precise terror the fairies feel when the human bandits grab them. It forcibly bridges the gap between distant sympathy and true lived empathy.
Wow. That completely reframes the mechanics of the scene. He's no longer fighting for them, he is suddenly one of them. And it pays off beautifully in the text because while he is trapped in Sophie's giant hand, he doesn't threaten her.
No, he doesn't try to fight.
He talks to her. He explains who he is, what he does at the sanctuary, and the horrors he's seen the bandits commit. And Sophie looks down at this tiny, incredibly vulnerable man, and she realizes he's telling the truth.
And she asks us a question, right?
She asks him a haunting question.
Right.
Why do humans do these terrible things? And Timmy doesn't give a heroic speech. He gives this honest, tired answer about greed and cruelty, but promises that people like him will never stop fighting it, even if it feels hopeless.
He earns their trust not through a display of strength, but through a display of shared vulnerability.
And later in the story, when the bandits actually do locate and attack the forest, Timmy is still tiny. He can't draw his sword and fight them physically.
But the fairies don't need him to.
Exactly. Because he built that bridge of absolute trust, the dynamic shifts. The entire fairy colony, led by a scarred, fierce, black-winged fairy named Vigo, rallies together. They don't wait to be saved.
They fight back.
They swarm the bandits, using their speed, magic, and sheer numbers to blind and drive the humans out of the forest.
The victims become their own saviors. Timmy is standing by as an ally, cheering them on, but he is not the white knight robbing them of their agency.
It's an incredibly powerful subversion of the fantasy trope. So we've seen characters dealing with physical size changes in high fantasy settings. Gwendolyn growing to understand consequence, Timmy shrinking to understand vulnerability.
Right.
But the final set of sources in our stack takes this concept into a completely different, almost dizzying meta-narrative direction. It blurs the lines between the creator, the creation, and the digital world.
We are moving completely out of the high fantasy forests and into a modern, recognizable suburban setting, and the protagonist of this specific story is literally named Casper.
Yes. The author actually puts an avatar of himself directly into the narrative. In this story, Casper wakes up, groggy and confused, lying on the hard asphalt of a suburban street. But the asphalt looks wrong.
It looks like a landscape.
It looks like a massive landscape of gray valleys and glittering mountains of gravel. He realizes with mounting claustrophobic horror that he is shrunk to the size of a coin.
And as he's standing there trying to process this impossible, terrifying reality, a massive shadow falls over him, blocking out the sun.
A towering teenage girl in a school uniform with a bright red bow in her hair stops walking and looks down at him.
Now, for anyone who hasn't spent time in the visual novel or gaming space, we need to explain who this is. The girl is Sayori.
Sayori from Doki Doki.
Yes, she is a character referenced directly from an infamous game called Doki Doki Literature Club.
To give a very quick summary for those who don't know, it's a game that presents itself as a cute, bright, cheerful dating simulator, but it slowly unravels into a deeply disturbing psychological horror experience about depression, self-awareness, and characters realizing they are trapped inside digital code.
Casper Friss is taking these pre-existing recognizable video game characters and using their established lore to explore his themes.
Which is such a bold move.
Yeah. It's a brilliant choice for a meta-narrative, because these characters are already known for wearing masks. They are digital code pretending to be real girls. In the story, Sayori is amazed by tiny Casper. She gently scoops him up into her massive hand, slips him safely into her jacket pocket, and carries him home.
And the entire emotional core of this narrative happens sitting on Sayori's wooden nightstand under the warm, isolating glow of a desk lamp.
It's such an incredibly intimate, quiet setting.
Tiny Casper, who is the size of a battery, and giant Sayori are having a deeply emotional conversation. Sayori, both in the original game and in this story, is known as the funny, happy girl.
She's the sunshine of her friend group.
She's the one who diffuses tension with a joke. But sitting alone in her room, looking down at this tiny man who is completely dependent on her care, her bright facade finally cracks.
She confesses something deeply heartbreaking. She admits to Casper that she maintains that constant, cheerful, hyperactive energy because she is terrified.
Terrified of what?
She is terrified that if people see her true, dark, heavy depression, if they see how hard it is for her just to get out of bed, they will abandon her. She feels like her only value to her friends, her only currency in society is being their entertainment. If she stops smiling, she stops mattering.
Oh, that hits close to home for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And Casper relates to this instantly. He doesn't offer empty platitudes. He explains that growing up, he was relentlessly bullied for being a loner, for being dyslexic, for liking video games and nerdy things.
He had to build walls.
He explains how he learned to build a wall, to hide his pain, to wear a mask of indifference, just to survive the schoolyard. He looks up at this giant weeping girl and delivers the thesis of the story. He says, "True strength is not being perfect. It is daring to show that you are not."
This quiet interaction on the nightstand sets the thematic blueprint for Casper's encounters with the other three girls from the literature club. He becomes a tiny, non-threatening confidant for these giant women, each of whom is hiding a different type of severe trauma behind a very specific behavioral mask.
Next, Sayori introduces him to her friend Yuri. Yuri is the complete opposite of Sayori. She is quiet, intensely shy, and constantly burying her face in thick books to avoid eye contact.
Sayori gently hands Casper over to Yuri, and Yuri takes him for a walk deep into a quiet, dense forest near their neighborhood. She places him gently down on a patch of soft moss.
And in the profound silence of that forest, away from the noise of the world, Yuri reveals her secret. She pulls up the sleeve of her thick cardigan to show him thin, faded scars crisscrossing her arm.
She confesses that she cuts herself, but the explanation she gives is vital.
Why does she do it?
She explains she doesn't do it because she wants to die. She does it because the voices and the anxiety in her head get so loud, so screamingly intense and overwhelming, that the sharp, localized physical pain of a cut is the only way she knows how to force her brain to focus.
Oh, wow.
It's a desperate mechanism to quiet the internal noise.
It's a breathtakingly raw moment of vulnerability. And then she shows Casper her hidden collection. Beautiful, smooth river rocks, intricate feathers, perfect leaves she's found in the forest.
She tells him she collects these quiet pieces of the physical world to hold on to when she feels entirely trapped inside the chaos of her own mind.
Casper doesn't judge her. He doesn't tell her to just cheer up or stop it. He just listens. He validates her overwhelming pain without treating her like she's a broken toy that needs to be fixed.
Then the narrative introduces Natsuki, and Natsuki's mask operates on an entirely different, highly aggressive mechanism. She is loud, abrasive, constantly snapping at people, starting arguments, and incredibly defensive about her hobbies, like reading manga and baking cupcakes.
Natsuki initially treats Casper like a weird, gross bug. She leans in close, her giant eyes glaring at him, and demands to know what he is and why he's there.
But Casper reads right through her.
He does. Drawing heavily on his own real-world history of surviving bullies, Casper reads right through her hostility. He recognizes the pattern.
Think of Natsuki's behavior like a biological defense mechanism, like a pufferfish inflating itself with water to appear larger and covered in spikes so predators won't swallow it.
That's a great analogy.
Casper deduces that her harsh exterior is entirely preemptive. She comes from an emotionally abusive home. She has a father who constantly degrades her, who makes her feel utterly insignificant, powerless, and small.
So the aggression is a shield.
Her aggressive, spiky personality at school is a defense mechanism. She barks and snaps at everyone so no one can ever get close enough to hurt her the way her father does. She makes herself unlovable so she can't be betrayed.
But Casper sees the frightened girl under the spikes. He tells her, "I know you're not just hard words. You're strong and you're incredibly caring."
And Natsuki, hearing someone finally validate her worth instead of reacting to her spikes, just breaks down. She lets her hair fall over her eyes to hide her tears, and admits in a tiny voice that she's just so exhausted from constantly fighting everyone.
Which brings us to the final, the most complex, and the most metatextual character in the entire universe. Monika. We really need to explain her role, because in the original Doki Doki game, Monika is the self-aware antagonist. She knows she is digital code. She knows she is trapped in a video game, and she knows she has the administrative power to manipulate the game's code, delete other characters, and change reality.
In Casper's story, she retains this terrifying godlike status.
Monica eventually brings tiny Casper into a sterile room, and the air literally crackles with green digital code. She looks at him and tells him that she knows he doesn't belong in this world.
She knows he is the author.
Yes. But she also tells him that she knows exactly what he desires. She knows about his real-world fascination with the Giantess genre, his desire for escapism.
She basically offers him a digital deal with the devil, a Matrix-style choice. The sterile room dissolves around them, and suddenly Casper is standing in the middle of a flawless, gleaming, utopian digital city.
It's perfectly designed.
Towering miles above him in the sky are giant, flawless, godlike versions of Sayori, Yuri, Natsuki, and Monica herself. Their hair is blowing like banners in the wind. Their skin is perfect.
They are smiling down at him, offering him absolute painless perfection. A flawless fantasy where he can live forever, protected by giant goddesses, never having to worry about dyslexia or bullying or real-world pain ever again.
It is the ultimate temptation of pure escapism. If you hide in the perfect fantasy, you never have to deal with the messy, painful, unpredictable reality of human flaws. You trade your reality for a comfortable lie.
But Casper rejects it. And the way he does it is so poignant. The perfect illusion flickers, and he looks up at the towering Monica, who suddenly looks terrified and insecure despite her godlike size.
What does he say?
He says, "I don't want a flawless god. I don't want a perfect illusion. I want the real you. I want the flawed, insecure, messy, real girl."
His rejection of the comfortable lie shatters the illusion entirely. The towering digital city turns to ash and dust, and they are suddenly back in the normal, messy room, sitting on the floor at normal size.
The power dynamic completely shifts.
Monica completely breaks down. She admits that her desire for absolute control, her need to present as a perfect, all-knowing entity, stems from a deep, profound terror of being abandoned and being truly alone in the universe.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want to pause and look at the physical mechanics of what just happened across these 4 encounters, because it is staggering.
It's a total inversion.
If we look at the physical dynamics, they are completely backwards from what we expect in a story about support. We have a physically microscopic man, a guy who could literally be crushed by a textbook falling off a desk, providing massive, life-saving emotional support to giant, towering, godlike women.
The physical size of the characters is inversely proportional to their emotional strength.
Yes.
That paradox is the brilliant engine driving Casper Frisk's work. By making the girls physically gigantic, he externalizes the concept of the mask. To society, these girls look huge, powerful, put together, and untouchable.
But inside?
But internally, emotionally, they feel as small, helpless, and fragile as tiny Casper actually is.
And because Casper is so physically small, he isn't perceived as a threat. He slips right past their massive, heavily fortified defenses. Yuri can't use her silence to hide from a guy sitting on her moss. Natsuki can't use her aggressive spikes on someone who fits in the palm of her hand.
Sayori can't use her bright smile to distract him when he's sitting alone with her in the dark. The extreme size difference forces the masks to come off.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, back to Casper Frisk, the real-world author sitting at his computer in Denmark, this entire story is a direct, urgent message to his readers.
Through the avatar of Tiny Casper, the author is teaching us that true strength is not masking your pain to please others. It is not building a flawless digital city to hide in.
True strength is daring to be vulnerable. It's admitting that you are hurting and allowing someone else to see the raw, unedited version of yourself.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a truly massive amount of psychological ground today.
We really have. We started by looking at a dyslexic creator using AI to bridge the gap between his mind and his audience. And we've traveled through forests with giant princesses, fairy sanctuaries dealing with severe trauma, and digital meta-realities challenging the nature of escapism.
We need to synthesize all of this for the listener. If we are going to explain this sprawling fantasy universe simply, as we set out to do at the beginning, what is it?
Right, let's bring it home.
It is a universe where shifting physical size, whether becoming a towering giant like Gwendolyn or a tiny speck like Timmy or Casper, is used as a narrative scalpel. It is designed to cleanly strip away the character's normal, everyday psychological defenses.
Exactly. The magic itself isn't the point. The giant shoes, the shrinking spells, the digital cities, the potions. The magic is just the Trojan horse. It's the dazzling visual spectacle used to trick us into sitting down and talking about the universal human need for empathy.
Empathy, deep understanding, and the incredible, terrifying courage it takes to show the world our hidden scars.
Whether you are a giant troll crying over a crushed flower because the world thinks you're a monster, a fairy whose wings have been violently stolen, or a teenage girl hiding severe depression behind a bright, practiced smile, the core human need remains exactly the same.
To be truly seen and to be accepted for who you truly are, flaws, scars, and all.
And that is exactly why this DeviantArt fiction matters to you, the listener. Because even if there are no giant blossoms or shrinking spells in our reality, we all live in a world of shifting sizes.
We really do.
We all have moments where we feel too big, or we feel incredibly clumsy, out of place. We're worried that our mere existence or our success is taking up too much space or burdening others. We fear that our footprint is doing damage, just like Gwendolyn.
And conversely, we all have moments where we feel impossibly, overwhelmingly small, where we feel voiceless against massive systemic problems, invisible to the people we love, or entirely crushed by the weight of external expectations.
Just like the fairies under the boot of the bandits, or Nasaki living in the shadow of her father.
We all wear these masks to navigate those wildly fluctuating feelings. We project immense strength and aggression when we feel tiny and scared, and we shrink ourselves down, trying to be invisible when we are afraid of our own power.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. We spent the last hour exploring how a sudden, magical, impossible change in physical size is the catalyst that forces these fantasy characters to finally drop their heavy masks and reveal their true, vulnerable selves.
The giant princess is forced to ask a tiny adventurer for help. The human hero is forced to rely on the lived empathy of the fairies.
So take a step back and ask yourself, what invisible size differences are you navigating in your own everyday relationships without even realizing it?
Are there hidden power dynamics? Imbalances in wealth?
Disparities in experience or gaps in confidence that make you feel artificially giant or artificially tiny around certain friends, family, or coworkers?
And what would actually happen if, just for a single moment, you actively chose to drop that mask and let someone see the real, true size of your hidden scars?
Because, as we noted at the very beginning of this journey, human psychology isn't a neat, clean X-ray. It's incredibly murky. The breaks aren't always visible on the surface.
The X-ray machine has always been broken. But maybe if we stop demanding to see clean white lines and start paying attention to the intricate, heavy masks we all wear to hide those fractures, we might just find the cure.
Keep diving deep.